Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for listening to the Locked On Wildcats podcast with John Schuster. I am merely Mike Luke. All right. We got a lot to get to. Actually, we don't have a lot to get to today. We're just going to talk about Arizona and ASU athletics real quick.
If I hit this just right, the little the sun in the background, it looks like I'm almost got a halo glow.
No, it really does. You might want to,
sweet?
yeah, it does. Or you could just have a little horn
right there.
Have a little horn coming out of you.
I could. It could be a little. It could be either way, and then we'd all question.
Speaking of something that has a horn on its head.
Oh, that's a transition for the ages.
That is ASU athletics right now. ASU football in particular. My, what a difference 8 months has made. They were my pick to win the conference last year. You look at it, this is the year that all that comes to fruition with, all the recruiting classes. You got your junior, you got your upperclassman quarterback, and fast forward about 8 months and you've lost 28 players to the transfer portal and not all OKGs. Like Arizona, we're used to losing guys to, Stephen F. Austin, Rice, things like that, directional schools. These kids are going to Ohio State, USC, LSU,
Well, they're going different directions.
Yeah, they're going in different directions.
Really big schools in those directions.
But I did not see one UL Monroe in there. Now, I could be wrong on that.
Well, there are 28. So ASU's done a very good job in the transfer portal of basically giving possibly one player to every school.
So how did we get to this point right here where Arizona football in the state, who it's won one of its last 21 games, has looked as the one on the ascendancy, while the other one's like, man, wait till that thing bottoms out.
It really is absolutely fascinating in that regard. And the mutiny, I think, has been fascinating as well. How we got here, ASU was a little. Right. Let's just go with a little flip when it came to their COVID sanctions, and so that obviously got them into a lot of trouble when they got busted as a result. But I think one of the things that I've kind of been fascinated by is how massive the mutiny has been. Right. There is pretty much nobody in that program has decided, you know what, I came to ASU. I like the coach. I'm just going to stick around. We're not going to be very good, but the school's okay. I don't want to deal with transfer. I can still do some things. Right. None of that happened. None of it. Next to none of that happened. Right. And it has been, there's been a lot of moving on. And, as a result, ASU's a program in trouble. Right. And they're going to be in trouble for a while until sanctions actually come down the pike, and with whatever happens with all these sanctioning entities and the NCAA in general, who the hell knows how long that's going to be. Right.
It's weird too, because you watch ASU and even when they're talented, they're stupid. Last year, that was a pretty talented team, and they really just couldn't get out of their own way. It was very much a shades of the Dennis Erickson type teams, where you had a lot of talent and there's nothing going on. Now, I think what's a little bit different for me though is that it's going to be a little bit more difficult, I think, to get a good coach. Well, maybe it won't. Explain why ASU should still be able to get a good coach.
I think it's there are a few reasons why that still remains in the long term a job with potential. You're looking at a program that you could argue at its best is potentially fifth in the conference. And second or third in the Pac-12 South, which gives you an opportunity to be successful. Your population base is in the fourth largest city in the country. That helps with recruits that have improved in that regard. So if you can do a good job in Phoenix, those are good things. Not to mention you're going to make $3 million a year. Right. That's not a bad thing. Right. And if you're young, and this becomes interesting, the direction that ASU ultimately goes. And I am guessing that what's going to happen is that once sanctions become official, that then ASU will sever its relationship with Herm Edwards. Right. They're waiting for that to happen, similar to what Arizona did with Sean Miller. Once that happens,
real quick, by the way, Bruno.
Yes.
Everybody always wants to know what's Bruno up to. This is what Bruno does right here. He's about to take a shot. Go ahead and do it, Bruno. You're on live TV right now. Mm-hmm. He did it. He did it. That's what Bruno does. Good one. Let's take a quick break, but first I want to tell you about BetOnline Sportsbook. If you wanted to bet, and I'm not sure they would have this line, but if you wanted to bet on a line about when Bruno was going to take a shot at John Schuster, that would have been the place to do it. Let's take a quick break. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. All right, Schuster, let's talk about ASU a little bit more here and about what's your theory. You should be able to get a good coach in there.
I think you can get a confident coach.
Right. Okay.
At least that. And I'm guessing that the next step would be that ASU goes in one of two directions.
Right.
And that is go with a young, confident guy who believes that he can use this in essence as an audition tape for better jobs.
Right.
If you're a young coach who can make ASU frankly, if you're any coach, but young, you still got a career ahead of you.
Right.
And you're trying to be upwardly mobile. If you can come into ASU, make ASU a 500 football team with all of those sanctions, a lot of other schools are going to be looking at you and say, whoa, that guy succeeded there with all of that cloud looming over
going on there. Yeah.
This guy has a chance to win somewhere else, maybe at our school.
Right.
So there's audition tape possibilities with that job.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that ASU could conceivably go with a 60-year-old by the rules guy who's really solid.
Right.
And just try to stabilize it for about 5 years and then see if you can get things rolling a little bit.
Right.
But overall, generally speaking, once this runs its course, I don't think ASU is SMU.
Right.
I don't think they're a death knell program that's going to be affected as a result of this for 20 years.
Right.
They have they have opportunities in their corner to be successful once this works itself through.
Right.
And so as a result of that, I can see a lot of more coaches than you think looking at the job and believing that it has potential there for the immediate career thing is they can pay me $3 or $4 million to coach in Phoenix.
Right.
I can play golf too.
Right.
Okay. I can listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can do a good job here, then you're in a position where you can get other gigs that are very appealing as well. And if you're really good and like the idea of staying around,
right,
you got a chance to be successful there. I mean, regardless of the only thing that, as near as we can tell, the only thing that ASU did, and I'm going to go wink, wink, nod, nod, illegal here, is that they recruited more aggressively at a point in time where there were COVID sanctions.
Right.
But COVID sanctions weren't in place with those first three top 20, top 10, top 15 recruiting classes.
Right.
So that coaching staff could recruit.
Right.
And they weren't recruiting based on COVID sanctions.
Right.
So there's the potential there to be able to bring athletes to that university and make it a program that a lot of folks have thought it could be for some time. Now, obviously, based on the way things have happened and the way that they handled COVID stuff, I think that's something that's going to be, 5 years down the road, best case scenario.
Right. All right. Let's take a quick break. All right, thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. Now let's talk a little bit of let's talk a little bit of basketball here. Tommy Lloyd seems to have righted the ship. Arizona is back amongst the nation's elite. Bobby Hurley is kind of mercurial, like we talked about. He gets a lot of talent. They haven't been able to break through. What does the future hold for ASU?
My inkling is that what we've seen, generally speaking, from the Sun Devils is what we're going to get from this point on. A team that's roughly 20-13 and inconsistent. One of the things that Hurley has been able to do, to his credit, he's been able to do this better than – I'm having a hard time thinking of a coach at ASU that's been able to do this as well. He's been able to get athletes to ASU.
Right.
At least in that regard – ASU looks like it has the talent to be a competent men's basketball team.
Right.
But then you watch them, and and half the time, at least you're trying to figure out what the hell is this team doing?
What are you doing out there? Right.
What's your other than? And it's almost like Hurley, and you use the word mercurial, and I think that's spot on. Hurley is a more mercurial Steve Lavin.
Right.
It's like or Todd Bozeman.
Right.
Without the Bozeman.
Without the Bozeman. Right.
You can get players, you can get athletes, and then what do you do with them?
Right.
And then if you don't have an idea what you can do with them and you're more or less a mediocre coach, then you're going to have programs that don't reach their potential, and that's what it feels like with ASU. To me, like ASU, and last year I thought was really interesting This is a team that for how long is the basketball season? 4 months?
Right.
3 of those months, ASU was crap.
Mm-hmm.
And it was baffling if you actually watched the talent on the court,
right?
Why they were as bad as they were,
right?
Didn't make sense. And then the last month of the season, they were good,
right?
So is that going to be a variation of what ASU ultimately is?
Right.
Can they string together 4 months of being good and finishing at higher spots in the conference? I don't know. It seems like this is kind of what Hurley is. He got away with it at Buffalo, and now that you get to a Power 5 conference, you can still bring in talent. What are you ultimately going to do with it? That seems to be the question mark at a program that I figure is going to be 20-13 more often than not, and kind of being,
and that's where you're kind of cool with.
Yeah, a fringe. Maybe they're a fringe tournament team all the time.
He's John Schuster. I'm Mike Luke. Thanks for keeping it locked on.